Hello, I'm Judy Woodruff. As the United States Congress returns to work, the deficit-cutting supercommittee begins its tough task. At the same time, the raw feelings between Republicans and Democrats have not healed since the debt ceiling debate over the summer. Both of our guests this month are veterans of the Senate and the House of Representatives, Republican Trent Lott and Democrat Tom Daschle. Both were elected Senate Majority Leader when their party was in power, and each served 18 years in the upper body. Today, they both work for firms which lobby Congress for various interest groups. I sat down with the former senators here in Washington, and we talked about the supercommittee, the partisanship in Congress, and the upcoming presidential election. Senator Lott, Senator Daschle, it's good to see you both. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Judy.
We're delighted to be with you again.
So the big question of the day, will this congressional deficit-cutting supercommittee be able to do what it is charged with doing, and that is cut $1.5 trillion in spending over the next couple of months? Senator Daschle, what do you think?
Well, I think the conventional wisdom is that it's going to be very difficult, but they've got a lot of incentives to do it. First of all, the size of the debt. Secondly, what happens if they fail? What happens if they fail is a sequester across the board, defense and discretionary spending. So you've got a couple of motivations there that may change conventional wisdom over time.
And what do you think, Senator Lott?
I think probably they wish it would not be called supercommittee. And their target is 1.5, but they have to get, I think, a minimum of 1.2. So they have a target and then a minimum they have to get. I actually, as is usually the case, I'm optimistic. I think they can get the job done. I do think Tom is absolutely right because of the size and the magnitude of the problem, but also because they've more or less boxed themselves in. I mean, whether you like this arrangement or not, the incentives to get an agreement, when you look at the alternative, is pretty serious.
Well, if you think there's a good chance they're going to do that, what do you think the outcome would be? Senator Daschle, I mean, do you think we're looking at unanimous agreement on a combination of entitlement cuts, Social Security, Medicare, along with revenue increases? Or are we looking at a Republican moving over to the Democrats and agreeing to higher taxes, or a Democrat moving over to the Republicans and saying, let's do it all on the spending side?
Well, you've listed all the scenarios, Judy. If I had to guess, I would say that getting unanimity out of any group, and I agree with Trent, this is probably as good a group as you're going to get, with real players who are substantive and thoughtful, who care deeply and ideologically, but nonetheless recognize the stakes. So I think that you've got the right mix, but I think that unanimity is difficult. If I had to guess, I would guess it maybe 10-2, 11-3, something like that. I think you could get an overwhelming vote if you reach consensus. And if I had to guess, it would probably be along the lines of the framework set out by the Simpson-Bowles Commission, something along that line that includes cuts and revenues. But the revenues would be framed in a reform mode rather than a revenue-raising mode. And I think that, especially for Republicans, is an important distinction.
So, Senator Lott, does that sound right to you, about 10-2?
Tom's more optimistic than I am this time. I doubt if he'd go that far. But the important thing is that they do come to an agreement. I don't think you're going to see, a big agreement maybe in any of the categories. I think they're going to look for some legitimate reforms, some in the entitlements area, some in the discretion area, and some tax reform too. I'm not sure you can do tax reform piecemeal. They may have to do it in a broader sense in order to make it fair and to get some revenue, but do it in a way that Democrats would like it, but also that it's acceptable to Republicans. They've got a challenge, but it clearly is doable. And I do think that the Bowles-Simpson committee laid out how it can be done. You probably can't go to the numbers, the levels that they went, but you could take a good portion that could use their guidelines to reach an agreement.
I guess, Judy, I would just say that I'm still, I'd say overall 50-50 on whether they can do it. But if they do it, my sense is they would probably do it with a larger than just one-person majority, that they would probably get a larger number, but not unanimity.
They're probably going to try to get 2 to 4 to hold hands and jump together, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And that's where you'd come to the 10-2.
Exactly.
And when you look at the makeup, I've studied we know each one of those members very well, and we could pretty well figure out who they might be.
You want to say who they might be?
No, I wouldn't dare do that to them right now.
Different subject, but related. President Obama is now proposing a $300 to $400 billion jobs package, extending and enlarging the payroll tax holiday, a big infrastructure project, and assistance to states to avoid laying off teachers and first responders. Do you think Senator Lott is likely to get any of that?
Well, I hope that he will give a good speech, which he is very capable of doing, and then I hope he will follow up. He needs to dig into it. He needs to really push it. He needs to meet with the key leaders in the committee and sit down and say, okay, what can we do together? I don't think the size of it is going to blow people out of the water. I think that there are a lot of people would be supportive of the extension of the payroll tax reductions that were put in place last year.
Senator Daschle, what do you think the chances are?
Judy, I agree with Trent almost entirely. I think in the short term we've got to be concerned about the state of the economy. We could be slipping right back into a second and maybe even deeper recession, and I think that requires some investment. I think the payroll tax cut, and then look at long-term debt, medium and long-term debt reduction. The combination of those two things, along with a very aggressive monetary policy, is what has to happen. Today, I would say that it's going to be uphill, and I think Senator Lott's prescription on how you get there, that is engagement between the president and leaders in Congress, is absolutely essential.
When we come back, the political divide in Washington. Let's talk about Washington. There have always been partisan differences in this city, and that's healthy. But are those differences, Senator Lott, more pervasive and deeper than they've ever been? And is that unhealthy now?
I think they are. You know, Tom and I are obviously good friends now, but we had our philosophical and our policy differences over the years, but it wasn't mean-spirited. And we actually, considered each other's problems and needs. It's not that way so much now, but I think, that we shouldn't try to rewrite history. We had our battles. They weren't easy, but the times are so different now. The 24/7 news media coverage, the ideological differences where in the Senate, for instance, you got a lot more people on the extremes, and the middle has disappeared pretty much. And I think also just they fly home every weekend. I think that's so bad. Tom and I both had our families here, so they come in on a Monday or a Tuesday, and the first question they ask is, "How do I get out on Thursday?" Because they want to get back to the constituents. They want to be with their families back there, and therefore you don't develop personal relationships, and that makes a huge difference in life as well as politics.
How do you see it, Senator Daschle?
Couldn't agree more. I think that the constituencies also have more leverage today because, unfortunately, money is even bigger.
Meaning?
Well, different interest groups, different ideological as well as commercial and home constituencies. I mean, there's just a lot more. I think the politics has become far more complicated and far more expensive, and so that's part of it. But I agree with Trent. I think you've got the media, the bloggers, all of the things online, in addition to the race for money, the fact that families don't spend any time here. It's almost, you never hear of families moving to Washington anymore, and so the camaraderie, the comity that you try to create just doesn't exist. If you don't know somebody, it's pretty hard to work with them.
Let me ask you let's look at the short-term causes. Senator Daschle, Republicans say that during the first couple of years of the Obama administration, the White House virtually ignored and in the words of some of them, ran roughshod over Republicans.
Well, I think that it's very important, and every time I've had the opportunity to advise a president about how to get along with Congress, my advice was meet with us. Spend some time, have a weekly breakfast, an annual trip to Camp David. Do the kinds of things that really build bonds. I don't think that we've done as good a job of that. That is, the Democrats have done as good a job of that, and the White House I wish we could have. The golf game was good, but that was once. I'd love to see more of that kind of thing. The more they interact, the more likely it is they're going to get along.
Well, let me ask this another way, Senator Lott, because given the big issue right now is deficit reduction. All the independent commissions, you both have mentioned Simpson-Bowles, Domenici-Rivlin, conclude that a solution is going to require major cuts in entitlements as well as revenue increases. Now, the president has said publicly he's willing to go against the Democratic base and seriously cut entitlements. No Republican leader today has said that he's willing to go along with revenue increases. So the question, I think, in the minds of many people is that putting party before country?
Well, I do think that we're going to have to come to terms with some entitlement reforms. I think when you just say cutting, maybe, that scares people off. Also, if you listen carefully, there have been a few Republicans saying, well, now, wait a minute, if we're talking about real reforms, closing some loopholes that, frankly, are indefensible, and, by the way, in the process, cutting individual rates, cutting corporate rates, realizing that we need to get some revenue out of it that would help our overall deficit problem, that's where the solution is. You're going to have to do a little bit of all of it. But I think, and Tom and I used to talk about this, sometimes you stand up, take the right position, even though within your party ranks, they may not agree with you, they admire the leadership.
But there was a recent debate with all the Republican candidates running for president at that time, and they were asked, would you be willing to accept $1 in tax increases for $10 in spending cuts? And they all said no, that they couldn't go on.
Well, as a matter of fact, none of them will be involved with the supercommittee and coming up with the results. So they've got to do what they've got to do in the process of a political campaign. But somebody in this country, somebody in this city has got to step up and say, we're going to produce a product. We're going to do it now. And I really think you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Tom and I used to use a technique when we were majority leaders, both of us, where we would double track. We'd actually be doing two bills at the same time. Here's what I'm saying. We can work with a long-term need to solve the debt and the deficits and the debt, while also doing some things that help grow the economy and create jobs. You can do both.
Dysfunction in the Senate after the break. The body that both of you served a long time in, I guess it was 18 years each. It is said, Senator Lott, that the Senate has become practically dysfunctional, or at least the worst it's been in a long time. How do you see it?
Well, I loved my time there, and it was a great experience. But I remember in my last year there, one night we were doing one of these infamous votoramas, where the Senate is voting every 10 or 15 minutes on an amendment, and sometimes 70 in a row, and you really didn't even know what they were. And I was standing there with a group. We were talking about what's wrong. Why are we doing this? It looks so bad, and why can't we do a better job? Is it the institution itself? Is it the rules we've allowed to develop? Or what is it? And I said, no, it's not the institution. And it's not the rules, even though they clearly can be improved, could be changed, should be changed over time. The problem is us. It's called leadership. Again, was what Tom was referring to. I believe that in the next few years, you're going to see the Senate will return to some of the way it used to do business.
And in fact, Senator Daschle, academic studies show that there's less bipartisanship in the Senate than at any time since the Civil War.
No, I think that's right. I don't know that there's any magical solution here. Obviously, more comity, far more opportunities for members to interrelate. If I were to do it over again, one of the things I wish we had done, and we didn't do that often except after a crisis, is hold joint caucuses more frequently. That's probably inside baseball for your viewers, but the caucuses are held separately, and they almost become pep rallies too often, bipartisan. But when we had impeachment, when we had 9/11, when we had anthrax, we did joint caucuses, and it really united our Senate. And where members sat next to each other and compared notes and really began to trust each other. I think we need to do more of that. I'd love to see more joint caucuses and more opportunity for the whole body to sit informally off the record saying, what are we going to do about this?
Well, we did it when we were literally threatened. Ourselves, our staffs, our lives were threatened, and our country was threatened. In the case of anthrax, it was us. In the case of 9/11, it was all of us. And the crisis caused us to shake off a lot of the other things and say, we're going to do the right thing for the circumstances now and for our country. I would maintain that we're at another crisis, and it's one that really makes me even more angrier than the others. This is about my grandchildren. If we don't begin to do some things differently to get back on some different tracks, I worry about where my grandchildren will. I take that very seriously.
Just quickly on this point, is there any way the filibuster rule, which of course requires 60 senators to vote to shut down a delaying tactic, a debate, could be changed so that it's only used for important matters and not routinely? Just quickly, what do you two think? Is there any prospect?
It's possible, but not likely.
I would agree. I would agree. I would actually, I had somewhat of a change of heart on nominations. You know, when you've got people that are only going to serve for a couple of years, and you filibuster them for a year or two, it defeats the whole purpose. And I think the whole nomination process needs to be examined to see how we might make it more fair and less political and much more efficient as we choose the people who are going to fill these important positions.
One other question on this. The governor of Texas, Rick Perry, has called for eliminating the direct election of senators and having them appointed by the state legislature.
Terrible idea. I would never have been into the Senate. No, that's not. That was one of the least democratic things that our founding fathers came up with. Let the people decide.
Absolutely. I can't. It's hard for me to understand how some politicians who espouse to support the Constitution are so apt to change it.
And by the way, I've gone back and forth. For a while there, I was really liking the idea of term limits. And then I decided, I'm not so sure about that. But in the end, I read a book about the great debates. And as I was reading the book, I realized if there had been term limits then, neither of them would have even been in the Senate. We have term limits. It's called an election. And let the people decide. I don't think arbitrary restrictions of limits serve us well. Plus, it just further empowers staff who already have too many powers.
And lobbyists.
Yeah, and lobbyists, yeah. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that.
That's right. Or me.
Up next, predictions for the 2012 presidential election. Quick prediction. Who, as of today, is likely to be the President of the United States on January the 21st, 2013? Senator Lott?
Mitt Romney.
President Barack Obama will begin his second term.
You knew the answer, at least on the second part. I might have surprised you on the first
Well,
part.
one of you is going to be wrong, but we're waiting to see. All right, what about the House and the Senate? How do you see who's going to control the House and the Senate? Senator Lott.
I think the Republicans have an excellent opportunity to take control of the Senate. It's not a done deal, obviously, but the numbers favor them. I think the House is going to be very competitive. I think if Republicans think, hey, we got it, we're keeping it, no matter what, they better be careful.
I do think the numbers obviously favor the Republicans in the Senate. It's about a 2-to-1 ratio right now for those who are running, so that's always a big advantage. I do think, as Trent said, the House is going to be very competitive. If you look at the generic numbers, the Democrats can take it back.
This is I want to ask the same question to both of you. Over the course of your careers, what member of the other party with whom you worked did you especially admire and respect, other than the person who's sitting next to you?
I have to say Bob Dole was a very special leader as well, and a friend, and somebody I've enjoyed my relationship with for a long, long time. I also had a wonderful relationship with Bob Michael. I've always thought very highly of Bob Michael, another good leader.
And in the same vein, who in today's Senate, Senator Lott, fits that mold? Is there any Democrat for you who fits that mold of somebody who's a giant in the upper body?
Well, it's a little more dicey when you start talking about people that are there now. The Senate has changed a lot. There were a lot of characters in the Senate when I first came to Washington, and some even when we got there. Pat Monahan was quite a character, a Democrat, one that I had lunch with. I thoroughly enjoyed being with him, and he and I actually tried to do some things together on the Finance Committee. In fact, to solve the Social Security long-term problem, we had an arrangement that we couldn't quite sell.
Name any Republicans today in the Senate in particular who stand out for you in the giant mold?
Well, I think, newer members they've got to earn their stripes. They've got to become the giants. I think, as Trent suggests, there are people on both sides that have the potential to be the next giants, to be those people with the vision and the courage and the leadership. But you've got to earn your stripes. You've got to go through the battles. You've got to win this fight on the budget. You've got to figure out what we're going to do worldwide. We've got to figure out how we're going to address the economy. The people who can give us some guidance and show their vision and show their courage and show their persuasiveness are the giants of the future.
Since I retired from the Senate in '07, and since Tom retired, there's been about a third of the Senate has turned over. So you got a lot of younger, newer members that are there.
My number was 1776, and the most recent number is 1931. So it's almost 200 senators since I was elected.
It's remarkable. Well, Senators, it's wonderful to see both of you.
Thank you, Judy.
Senator Tom Daschle, Senator Trent Lott, thank you very much for talking with us.
Our pleasure.
And that's our conversation with former Senators Tom Daschle and Trent Lott. I'm Judy Woodruff. We thank you for watching. See you next time.